What happens when a combat film stops feeling like a film and starts feeling like a memory someone lived through? Some stories go far beyond costumes and sets. They hit with a kind of truth that makes historians sit forward and say, wait, how did they pull that off? Because a few directors don't chase action, they chase accuracy. And once in a while, the result is so real, so shockingly precise, it feels like stepping into the past. Today, we count down 14 combat films that stunned the experts. Number 14, The Longest Day, 1962. It begins with a promise. Not entertainment, evidence. The Longest Day was built like a living archive, a giant reenactment powered by records, diaries, and memories from the people who were actually there. Producer Daryl Zanuck wasn't satisfied with secondhand accounts. He brought in veterans from the Allied landings to walk the beach with the cast, pointing out where the tides were, where the sandbanks shifted, and where men struggled for cover. Every uniform, every landing craft, every tiny piece of scenery was matched to real photographs from that June morning. What makes the film so unforgettable is its enormous scale. Multiple directors filmed different national perspectives, so the American, British, and French moments felt like distinct chapters from one massive event. Even the casting was symbolic. Legendary actors stood shoulder to shoulder with real soldiers, and when they climbed the cliffs at Pointe du Hoc, they didn't rely on special tricks. They climbed for real. Older rangers reenacted the hardest day of their lives under cameras and sky. Historians still use scenes from The Longest Day to teach students what the invasion looked like, not because it is flashy, but because it is careful. It captures courage without exaggeration and difficulty without turning it into spectacle. The film works like a museum that moves. Number 13, Saving Private Ryan, 1998. You think you know D-Day until you see the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. Then you realize most war films softened the truth. Steven Spielberg wanted viewers to feel the confusion, the scattered sounds, the panic, the way fear distorts time. So he stripped away glamour. Handheld cameras shook like real hands. Colors were drained until the world looked washed by smoke and seawater. And the cast was thrown into a grueling training camp that left them exhausted before filming even began. Veterans who lived through that morning said the sound design alone brought back memories they thought they had locked away. The ringing in the ears after explosions, the thump of water against helmets, the way voices fade into chaos when you're trying to understand orders. Spielberg worked with historians and military advisors to recreate the exact structure of units, the way medics moved, the way officers shouted commands through noise, and even the texture of the beach mud. What makes this film so overwhelming isn't just accuracy, it is honesty. The mission feels uncertain from the moment it begins. You see young men aging in minutes under impossible pressure. No polished hero moments, no perfect timing. Just the reality of choices made under fear and instinct. Historians praised it as the closest visual representation of Omaha Beach ever put on screen, and audiences walked out quietly because it didn't feel like fiction. It felt like survival. Number 12, Black Hawk Down, 2001. Black Hawk Down doesn't feel staged. It feels recorded. Ridley Scott approached the story of the Mogadishu raid like a reconstruction. Every movement, every line of dialogue, every moment of confusion was pulled from mission logs, radio transcripts, and first-hand accounts from the men who were there. The cast trained under real Army Rangers and advisors from the units involved. They moved, spoke, and reacted the way the soldiers remembered doing in the middle of dust and noise. The production design was equally intense. Entire sections of the city were rebuilt using satellite photos that showed where alleyways curved and rooftops tilted. The vehicles, gear, and communication patterns were matched to the real ones used during the event. Even small details like tired breathing during long runs, or the way teams regrouped after sharp turns, were rehearsed from memory sessions with veterans. What surprised historians most was the clarity in the middle of chaos. The film shows how fast situations changed, how a simple twist in movement altered everything, and how teams adapted instinctively when plans fell apart. It doesn't try to dress the story in perfect strategy or polished action. It focuses on the stress, the endurance, the way teamwork matters in every second. Black Hawk Down became a reference point for modern combat realism. It proved that truth is often more intense than fiction, and when handled carefully, it hits harder than any dramatic twist. The film endures because it respects both the difficulty and the humanity of those moments. Number 11. We Were Soldiers, 2002. Some films recreate battles. We Were Soldiers recreates memory. Director Randall Wallace worked directly with General Hal Moore, who commanded the real event in 1965. Moore provided maps, notes, and personal recollections that shaped everything from the landscape to the timing of the events. The film didn't rely on imagination. It relied on the testimony of people who felt the ground shake under them. Mel Gibson studied Moore's posture, tone, and sense of responsibility. Extras learned to move like a synchronized unit, because improvisation doesn't exist in moments like these. Even the dust of the valley was matched to old aerial photographs. The film shows the moment helicopter warfare entered a new era, with teams landing in tight spaces where misjudging a single second changed everything. What sets this movie apart is the way it portrays both courage and exhaustion. The calls for support, the rush to protect wounded teammates, the strain of communication under pressure all mirror the after-action reports from the real battle. The dialogue includes lines pulled directly from recorded transmissions, preserving the language of the moment. Historians praised the film for avoiding exaggeration. It does not polish the effort into a neat tale. It honors the confusion, the heart, and the reality that many decisions came down to instinct. When Moore watched the final cut, he simply said, "It happened this way." That is the highest compliment a historical film can receive. Number 10. Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006. Most films tell one side of a battle, but Letters from Iwo Jima tells the one that was almost lost to time. Clint Eastwood built the entire story from diaries, personal letters, and first-hand accounts written by Japanese soldiers before the invasion of the island in 1945. Those writings guided the tone, the pacing, and the emotional weight of the film. They reveal fear, duty, hope, and doubt in a way rarely shown in Western cinema. To protect authenticity, Eastwood hired language coaches, historians, and advisors familiar with the original documents. Cast members trained in the exact drills recorded in the diaries. They moved through bunkers built to match historical blueprints. Even the lighting inside tunnels was based on old photographs that showed how shadows stretched across the volcanic walls. What stunned historians was the emotional accuracy. The film doesn't present its characters as symbols. It presents them as individuals trying to understand impossible odds. The story follows the moments before the conflict, the decisions made with limited information, and the quiet thoughts preserved through letters that survived long after their writers did not. Letters from Iwo Jima stands out because it gives humanity to a chapter often summarized in numbers and strategy maps. It shows the cost of duty without sensational moments or exaggerated scenes. The film became a rare example of cinema that expands historical understanding instead of simplifying it. That is why experts still call it one of the most accurate portrayals of life beneath the ground at Iwo Jima. Number 9. Generation Kill, 2008. Generation Kill isn't just accurate. It is almost unsettling in its precision. This series is based directly on the real journalist who traveled with a Marine unit during the early days of the Iraq conflict. Instead of rewriting events, the creators followed his notes, recordings, and observations almost word for word. They didn't polish anything. They didn't soften the quiet moments or dramatize the loud ones. They simply showed how a real unit lived, talked, and moved day after day under the weight of uncertainty. What truly shocked historians was the commitment to behavioral accuracy. The cast trained with retired Marines who insisted on real-life routines, cleaning gear nonstop, checking surroundings automatically, and relying on dry humor to deal with stress. The production crew studied photographs and interviews to match posture, clothing, and even the way dust collected on helmets and sleeves. The dialogue is another reason the series feels so genuine. Conversations unfold the way they do in real units, with long stretches of waiting, sharp turns into tension, and sudden problem-solving that happens without dramatic speeches. Nothing feels staged, nothing feels written. It feels overheard. Generation Kill doesn't chase action. It chases truth. It shows how boredom and pressure work together, how confusion shapes decisions, and how real teams rely on instinct rather than flair. Historians praised it as one of the closest portrayals of modern deployment life ever captured on screen. It is one of the rare productions where the smallest details matter just as much as the big moments. Number 8. 1917, 2019. Some films make you watch a battle. 1917 makes you travel through it. Director Sam Mendes crafted the story from personal family memories and hours of consultation with historians who studied trench life in the First World War. The goal was simple: let viewers follow one mission in real time and feel the world exactly as soldiers did over a century ago. The result is a film that looks and moves like a living photograph. The camera tracks terrain built with exact measurements of trench systems, mapped using surviving diagrams from 1917 France. Even the timing of sunlight was planned with precision. Crews waited for the right shadows because the lighting had to match the natural conditions of the original battlefields. Historians praised the film's attention to the physical environment: the mud, the broken fences, the collapsed dugouts, and the abandoned farmlands all mirror visual records from the era. Soldiers in the trenches didn't walk through chaos. They walked through a maze of routines, dangers, and sudden decisions. That is exactly what the film portrays. Another standout feature is the exhaustion. Actors performed long takes without breaks, forcing them to breathe, stumble, and react naturally. Every gasp is real. Every moment of hesitation reflects the strain of moving through uncertainty. 1917 succeeds because it does not shout its accuracy, it breathes it. And historians agreed that it captures the emotional and physical rhythm of the First World War better than almost any previous film. Number 7. Hacksaw Ridge, 2016. Hacksaw Ridge tells the true story of a medic who stepped onto a battlefield without carrying anything for defense, relying instead on instinct, speed, and sheer willpower to protect others. Director Mel Gibson approached this story with remarkable dedication to factual detail. The team studied interviews from veterans who served with Desmond Doss and used them as the blueprint for every major sequence. Set designers rebuilt the cliff, known as Hacksaw Ridge, using measurements from military records. The incline, the rope climb, and the rugged terrain were recreated so the cast felt the physical difficulty of every step. Actors practiced carrying real stretchers through mud, rain, and steep drops, ensuring their fatigue was natural, not acted. Historians were particularly impressed with the portrayal of frontline medical care. The film shows how medics wrapped wounds quickly, how they signaled for support under pressure, and how they improvised solutions when supplies ran low. These actions were taken directly from testimonies of surviving veterans who witnessed Doss's efforts. What makes the film striking is not just its accuracy, but its commitment to compassion. It shows how one person's determination to help others can ripple through an entire unit. There are no exaggerated heroic poses. There is only a steady focus on resilience. Hacksaw Ridge stunned historians because it respects both the hardship and the humanity of the real story. It reminds viewers that bravery takes many forms, some quiet and steady. Number 6. Lone Survivor, 2013. Lone Survivor feels less like a reconstruction and more like a return to a memory. Director Peter Berg collaborated directly with Marcus Luttrell, the man whose real-life account inspired the story. Luttrell guided the cast through the landscape, explaining how the team moved through rocky slopes, how they communicated, and how everything shifted once the operation began. The production aimed to follow these details with near-total accuracy. The cast trained side by side with former Navy personnel, learning how to carry gear properly, how to climb through rough terrain, and how to fall safely during sudden drops. Their practice sessions were not staged. They repeated maneuvers over and over until their movements became natural habits. Historians praised the film for capturing something rarely shown: the physical toll of mountain combat. The setting itself becomes a force. Slopes pull against every step. Loose stones change direction. Shrubs block paths. Berg's team scouted locations that matched the Afghan terrain as closely as possible, down to vegetation and elevation patterns. The emotional tone also reflects the true accounts. The film focuses on teamwork under stress, quick decisions made under pressure, and the unspoken understanding shared by people who rely on each other. There are no grand speeches or dramatic pauses. Everything feels immediate. Lone Survivor stands out because it honors the difficulty of the mission without turning it into spectacle. It focuses on endurance, instinct, and the quiet strength that unfolds when plans collapse and choices narrow. Number 5. The Outpost, 2020. The Outpost is one of the most precise modern combat films ever made, based on the real events at combat. Outpost Keating, the production team rebuilt the entire location using satellite images, maps, and diagrams sourced from military archives. Even the surrounding hills were matched to real Afghan terrain using digital topography scans. Director Rod Lurie, who graduated from West Point, brought a level of structural accuracy rarely seen in film. The cast spent weeks training under real soldiers, learning routines, communication patterns, and the rhythms of life at remote posts. They practiced navigating through narrow pathways, watching for signs of movement, and coordinating under pressure. Historians were struck by how clearly the film shows the challenges of defending a position surrounded by higher ground. Strategy becomes geography. The tension builds from small details, sudden stillness, shifting shadows, and the constant pressure of limited visibility. The dialogue reflects recordings and testimonies from the actual events. Moments of humor, fatigue, confusion, and instinct all flow naturally, without dramatic exaggeration. When action begins, it follows the official investigation reports nearly minute by minute, something extremely rare in film. What sets The Outpost apart is its emotional truth. It doesn't present its characters as symbols. It presents them as people trying to manage fear while relying on trust. Historians praise the film for honoring both the accuracy of events and the humanity of those involved. Number 4. Das Boot, 1981. Das Boot isn't just a film. It is a pressure chamber, disguised as cinema. Director Wolfgang Petersen designed it to feel like you were sealed inside a real submarine during the Second World War. Instead of building a large, open set, the team constructed a narrow, cramped replica that forced actors to squeeze past pipes, duck under metal beams, and feel the same claustrophobia sailors described in their diaries. The production worked closely with historians and former crew members who served on German submarines. They shared stories about the smell of machinery oil, the constant hum of engines, and the nervous silence during depth charge attacks. Petersen used those memories as his guide. Even the lighting came from historically accurate sources, making everything look dim, tense, and metallic. Actors lived inside the submarine set for long stretches to build real exhaustion. Their hair, clothing, and skin show the gradual decline that comes from weeks without sunlight. Historians praised how the film captures the emotional highs and lows of life underwater, including the brief moments of laughter mixed with long stretches of tension. Das Boot does not glorify naval combat. It focuses on human endurance inside a steel tube surrounded by pressure, noise, and the fear of sudden disaster. For historians, the film became the gold standard for submarine accuracy. It doesn't just recreate the environment, it makes the audience feel it in their bones. Number 3. Come and See, 1985. Come and See is one of the rare films that historians describe as emotionally exact. Director Elim Klimov wanted to portray life in occupied Belarus during the Second World War without softening the truth. Instead of building controlled studio environments, he filmed in real villages, forests, and abandoned locations that mirrored the destruction of the 1940s. The young lead actor underwent an intense process guided by psychologists, not to frighten him, but to help him endure the weight of the role. Klimov worked with survivors who lived through the real events, listening to their stories about fear, hiding places, sudden danger, and the unbearable quiet that followed moments of chaos. Those stories shaped the film's pacing, sound design, and emotional rhythm. Historians were stunned by the accuracy of the small details: the burned fields, the broken homes, and the way characters move with silent caution through destroyed landscapes. Nothing feels staged. The camera follows characters as if it is witnessing memories, not filming scenes. What makes Come and See uniquely powerful is its refusal to offer dramatic triumph. It focuses on the experience of a teenager who watches the world change around him. The shock, the confusion, and the emotional collapse mirror survivor testimonies. Many historians consider it the most truthful representation of life in occupied Eastern Europe ever put on screen. The film does not entertain, it confronts. And that is why experts still study it with respect. Number 2. Tora, 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 1970. Tora, Tora, Tora is a rare achievement, a combat film praised by both American and Japanese historians. Instead of telling one side of the story, the production split the film between two directing teams. The Japanese side was handled by filmmakers who studied original diaries, naval records, and archived reports about the events leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor. The American side consulted their own historians, eyewitnesses, and surviving planners who understood the timeline from their perspective. This dual approach created a balanced, deeply researched view of the events. Every ship deck, every flight formation, and every radio message was recreated from documents and verified accounts. The production team even located surviving equipment to match visual details from the era. Instead of dramatic flourishes, the film focuses on the step-by-step decisions that shaped history. Historians applauded its commitment to accuracy. The film avoids sensational framing and instead shows the complexity of communication mistakes, delayed warnings, and moments of confusion on both sides. It doesn't rewrite events for excitement. It follows them as they unfolded. What makes Tora so impressive is the lack of dramatized heroes. It shows individuals trying to follow their responsibilities during a rapidly evolving situation. The film remains a respected historical reference because it treats every detail carefully, from uniforms and aircraft markings to the pacing of the final moments before the attack. Experts still call it one of the most balanced portrayals of pre-war tension ever made. Number 1. The Beast of War, 1988. The Beast of War is one of the most surprising entries on this list because it did not begin as a major Hollywood production. Yet historians often cite it as one of the most accurate portrayals of tank crews during armed conflict. The film follows a Soviet crew traveling through rugged Afghan terrain during the 1980s. Instead of leaning on large battle scenes, the story focuses on communication, navigation challenges, and internal tension inside the vehicle. The production team studied real tank procedures, including how crews coordinated inside tight spaces, and how quickly decisions had to be made in steep valleys and narrow passes. The interactions among the crew reflect real accounts of stress, confusion, and the pressure of dealing with constant uncertainty. Historians were also impressed with the environmental accuracy. The film shows the difficulty of moving heavy vehicles over uneven ground, how terrain affects timing, and how small misjudgments create major consequences. The emotional tone mirrors the testimonies of soldiers who described long stretches of silence interrupted by sudden decisions. What makes The Beast of War stand out is its commitment to showing people, not symbols. There are no perfect leaders or flawless plans. There are only individuals trying to understand a landscape that shifts with every mile. This honesty impressed historians, who called it a hidden masterpiece of realism. The film remains a powerful example of how accuracy and storytelling can coexist without exaggeration. So there you have it, 14 combat films, so real they made historians take a second look. These stories didn't chase spectacle, they chased truth. If any entry hit you harder than expected, tell me in the comments. And if you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe. History feels different when it feels alive.